In today's episode, how a community college help desk got what must surely be one of the weirdest tickets they've ever seen. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe so you will never miss a video. So let's get started. How a community college help desk got what must surely be one of the weirdest tickets they've ever seen. Greetings TFTS. This may not be the most exciting of tales, but it does have some twists and turns which I think make it worthwhile. It's also pretty much the only thing that's happened to me in this job which I find interesting enough to post here. What you'll end up reading if you decide to continue was an absolute comedy of errors made mostly by me. It's slightly embarrassing in hindsight, but I was tickled pink by the situation at the time, regardless. I hope you enjoy it as well. I also really like writing, and I will be indulging in a tangent or two. Everything is relevant, I promise, but be warned. A bit of setup to start. This is not going to make sense with the title at first, but we'll get there. I am the primary local IT person at my workplace. It's a private business owned by a major US corporation. I work closely with a team of others, but without getting specific, their focus is mainly on other things. Deploying, maintaining, and troubleshooting user PCs is, for the most part, solely in my domain. In the far distant past of mid to late 2020, our glorious parent corporation made a bulk computer purchase to replace all of the aging hardware around the company. Ours is one of the larger locations, and we still had a lot of old crap kicking around. The need for most people to have the flexibility to work from home just in case it was ever necessary had become apparent, plus we'd finagled certain things so as to get more laptops than we'd actually need right away. All told, we ended up being allocated around 150 brand new laptops, plus a limited number of desktop PCs. Due to a combination of manufacturing delays, shipping delays, and poor decision-making by our ever-wise, corporate IT overlords, we didn't actually receive the new laptops until around June-July 2021. By this point the pandemic was in full swing, and much of the near-decrepit hardware that was destined for a dumpster had been sent to people's homes instead. I had fortunately had the good sense long beforehand to upgrade everyone to SSDs, so with a few exceptions, everything was mostly functional. System boards were starting to fail at an accelerating rate, but as soon as the shipment of laptops finally arrived, those people could be issued new systems as needed. Once the chaos of the sudden work-from-home transition eventually subsided, busiest 2 months of my life, and most of the lingering issues settled down, second busiest 2 months of my life, I had the luxury of taking my time with the new laptop deployments. I could go through one department at a time to bring each user back into the office, only one at any given time due to social distancing, to sign onto the network, sync their profile data, configure their applications, blah blah blah, and leave with a shiny new laptop. I could afford to drag my feet a little on the people or departments who were known pains in the ass, using the more tech-savvy, low-maintenance people as the test groups. The point of all that, plus other factors that I can't divulge, is that I hadn't gotten around to unboxing and powering on the last of the new laptops until around February 2022. It was near the end of the line that I came across something odd. Now, a tangent, but a relevant one. Some extremely competent individual at corporate IT thought it would be a good idea to have an SCCM OS deployment preloaded on every machine. What we were told to do at the outset was to simply plug each computer into the network prior to the initial startup so it could complete the task sequence, and then it'd be ready to go. Except that they wouldn't be even remotely ready afterwards. The OS drivers and software installed by the preloaded task sequence were all horrendously out of date due to the long series of delays, the longest of which actually would have been avoided were it not for this preloaded deployment nonsense, but going into that would require more detail than I'm comfortable sharing. Furthermore, the preloaded deployment would have added each computer to the domain with the system default hostname, and in the default, top-level computers OU. That meant that for every computer, I'd have to wait for the auto-deployment to finish, then manually update the hostname, then manually move it to the local OU, then wait for group policy to kick in so I'd have local admin rights, then apply the slew of necessary updates, then finally perform whatever individual configurations were needed for that particular machine. Every single time. I realized very early on, before the PCs even arrived, when corporate sent the above instructions, how stupid that was. I tried it anyway for the first batch of computers like a good little boy, and my instincts ended up proving spot on. Manually PXE booting straight out of the box didn't work because of whatever the preloaded task sequence does to the boot sector, or something like that, anyway. I could have booted to installation media and reformatted the disk first, but doing that every time was still more hassle than I'd like. I figured out that if I simply started up the machines while not connected to the network, I could just let the preloaded task sequence run its course, and it wouldn't be able to do any of the domain steps. I could then set it aside and wait until I needed to get more laptops ready. At which time, I could PXE boot like normal, running the OS deployment with the most recent updates, the correct hostname, and in the correct OU from the very start, without having to do any additional ADBS. Sure, the OS deployment itself took longer than if I'd followed the instructions, but not by all that much. Besides, who cares about the extra time it takes when that time is completely hands-off? I'd rather have something take 3 hours mostly hands-off than an hour mostly hands-on any day of the week. That way, I can be more productive over time while doing less work, but I suspect I'm preaching to the choir in that regard. My apologies. That was my only big tangent, I promise. I think I just needed to finally get that out. Anyway, configuring one of these new laptops typically went like this. Don't connect it to the network. Then power it on, wait for the preload to finish, power off, connect to the network, PXE boot, run the OS deployment, install department-specific software, done. I had it down to a science, and usually did anywhere between 3 and a dozen computers at a time. Near the end of the line, however, something strange happened. Now, the warning signs of what actually occurred were as obvious as they were numerous, but hindsight. I came across a laptop which didn't launch into the dumb preloaded OS deployment. Instead it was standard, OOB Windows 10. Fine by me, I thought. Saves me some time. Then the very next laptop I grabbed did the same thing. It was just those 2 out of the 150 or so laptops that did this, and they happened to be right next to each other on the pallet. So that's weird, but no big deal, right? I proceeded to install the OS and get the laptops configured like normal, but then realized there was something wrong with the displays. They looked like crap. The color was washed out, the backlight was funky, and the resolution wouldn't go above 1368 by 768. Even the BIOS looked awful. Surely that's wrong, I said to myself. There's no way you can buy a business-class laptop this expensive with a display this bad. I went through all the typical troubleshooting and concluded the LCDs were either faulty, or the manufacturer installed the wrong ones. Manufacturer support was awesome and accepted both laptops for repair without any fuss. The manufacturer sent a box for each laptop to be shipped to their repair center. Strangely, however, one of the boxes was the wrong size. It was for a larger, full-size model with keyboard plus keypad, which these laptops were not. So that's weird, but no big deal, right? Whoever put the shipment together must have just gotten the boxes mixed up. Stuff like that happens. Added a little extra packing material, and it was perfectly fine. Something else was strange about those return boxes, which was the shipping labels. I'd sent many laptops into the manufacturer for service over the years, and had never seen something like this. Normally, the shipping label has my name, followed by the name of our parent company, followed by the building address. These labels, however, had my name, followed by some other company, followed by the correct building address. Moreover, each label indicated a different company, they were not the same as each other. So that's weird, but no big deal, right? They still ended up in the right place, after all. Must have been some kind of bizarre glitch in their system, or else with the shipping company. I've seen much stranger things from FedEx. I shipped the broken laptops out for repair, and was fully satisfied the problem was solved. Some time passed, and one of the laptops returned. I booted it up and was surprised to see the display problem remained, despite the repair notes saying the LCD was replaced. I immediately set about writing a scathing response to the support technician, but stopped myself. I thought back on all of the warning signs I'd seen up to that point, each of which I had dismissed for what seemed like perfectly sound reasons. When considered all together, though, I knew exactly what the problem was at that moment, but wanted to be sure before I started sending emails and telling my boss. First I went digging on the manufacturer's purchasing site, and confirmed to my amazement that you can indeed spend well over $1,000 on a business laptop with a worse than awful 1368 by 768 display. If you have to stretch your budget that much, why would you not start with a cheaper brand? Or just buy Chromebooks? But I digress. I looked up the serial number on the manufacturer support site. Something which I had already seen earlier was that this laptop had a much shorter warranty than usual. This I had attributed to an error by corporate purchasing. It wouldn't have been the first time I'd seen it happen. Again, I had dismissed this warning sign for what seemed a totally valid reason. This time, I also looked at the listed specs. More than just the display was wrong. It had half the RAM, a slightly slower CPU, and a standard camera, as opposed to IR. Weirdly, they had the same size of SSD, which I guess was corporate cutting some of the cost in a way that makes sense for once. The laptops are all single-user, and most typical users won't need more than 256 GB to work with. The shared desktops are a different matter, but I digress. Finally, I did what I should have done at the very beginning. I turned the laptop over and looked at the bottom. Where I would normally expect to see a manufacturer fixed label indicating the company name, serial number, and warranty dates, there was not but bare laptop. My most recent suspicion was confirmed. This is not my laptop. It was shipped to me, and it was wrapped up on the same pallet as all the others, but this thing ain't mine. Neither, I expect, is the other one. Speaking of which, where is the other laptop? The two hadn't come back from the repair center at the same time, and it's now been 2 days since the first one returned. So that's weird, and I was no longer dismissing anything weird. So begins another tangent. It's not really a tangent though. More of an offshoot. So technically, I didn't lie when I said my first tangent was the only big one. This one is even bigger. But it's not a tangent. To make this less confusing, I'm going to give the two laptops names for this portion of the story. They will be called Leonard and Heinrich. I sifted through my emails and realized that I had only been receiving status updates for Leonard, the laptop which had already returned. Not one word for Heinrich. Heinrich had apparently fallen off the edge of the world the moment it left the mailroom. I looked up Heinrich's serial number and encountered something really weird. The site was trying to redirect me to international support because the number I had looked up was registered to a company in Germany. Pushing through, I saw that Heinrich not only had different specs, it was being shown as a different model altogether. That would explain why the manufacturer had sent me the wrong box, but how could this kind of mix-up have happened? Fortunately, I tend to be very fastidious with my documentation. I'll admit there were some lapses of this during the hectic early days of the pandemic. Otherwise, however, I make note every single computer's serial number, location, primary user, last reimage date, etc. in an Excel workbook. When my massive shipment of laptops arrived, I took all the serial numbers from the individual boxes as I counted them and added them to a new sheet. In hindsight, I should have used the packing slips for this, you'll see why. As I unboxed and imaged each laptop, I'd print what would be its hostname on a tape label, formatted, location, serial number, referring to the box label for the serial number. Then as they were imaged, I'd add the hostname from the label I'd printed to the proper location in my workbook with all the relevant info. It's a simple process that I had been using for years, and had never managed to screw up. Until now. I compared Heinrich's serial number with the list of serial numbers I'd made for the initial shipment and figured out what happened. For one laptop out of around 150, I mistyped the serial number when I was printing the label. By pure happenstance, that laptop turned out to be Heinrich. Also by pure happenstance, when I was creating the support case with the manufacturer, regarding what I thought were two faulty LCDs, I did it using Leonard's serial number and simply included Heinrich's in the case notes. When indicating Heinrich's serial number, I referred to the visible label I had printed, which was wrong. And because I did it through the case notes, the usual process of confirming the serial number didn't happen for Heinrich. Also by pure happenstance, the mistyped serial number was still a valid one. It was just for an entirely different laptop, not Heinrich. So when the manufacturer created a separate repair case in their system for the serial number I'd indicated, it went through just fine. They sent me the appropriate box for the serial number I'd given them. Instead of receiving the expected serial number, however, the repair center got Heinrich. This, I assume, is why I didn't get any status updates whatsoever about Heinrich. Heinrich didn't actually have an existing support case. Heinrich was just some random laptop as far as the system was concerned. This also explains why the shipping label for Heinrich's box showed a different company name than the label on Leonard's box. The label that the manufacturer generated wasn't for Heinrich at all. When I realized my idiocy, I emailed the manufacturer support technician to see if they could track down Heinrich. I spent about a day mildly freaking out, thinking that I'd lost Heinrich. It may very well have been halfway to a repair center in Europe for all I knew. Alas, my worrying was for nothing. I like to think that the person who opened the box at the repair center saw Heinrich, and was initially confused about the smaller laptop with the extra packing material around it. They may have then scanned Heinrich's actual serial number, realized it was one character off what was on the repair ticket, read the label that some idiot had stuck on there, and had a nice laugh at their expense before packing Heinrich back up in another, properly sized, box and shipping it back to whence it came. Oh, and instead of sending it next day express like they usually would, they slow shipped it just to make up for the waste of their time. So yeah, that's the anticlimactic end to this tangent offshoot. Heinrich made it back just fine, only a few days behind Leonard. This whole section is pretty much worthless to the overall story. It would have been cut were this not based on actual events. As it occurred, the mystery of what happened to Heinrich was just an extra bit of trouble I had needlessly made for myself, which needed to be resolved before I could actually address the main problem. Once both laptops were back in my possession, I confirmed that they were identical to each other in every way. Neither of these laptops were mine, and wherever they should have gone, they very likely ought to have ended up in the same place. Due in part to my meticulous documentation, I knew that we definitely received the correct number of new laptops. I had counted them twice when they arrived, and I was 100% sure of it, a claim I don't often make, especially of late. If we got two laptops which weren't really ours, that meant that two of our actual laptops were missing. So, where did they go? It was at this point that I could have simply raised the issue to someone in corporate purchasing, and let them figure it out. The manufacturer would have sent two replacements, and everything would have been settled. But do you honestly think I could have possibly resisted seeing this thing through to the end myself? Absolutely not. I had to know where our laptops went and where these two misfits were supposed to have gone. I turned back to one of the glaringly obvious warning signs from earlier, the shipping labels. As a reminder, because of how long this story has gotten, all of a sudden, when the two laptops went out for their unneeded repair, the manufacturer first sent a box for each laptop with pre-printed return labels. Those labels displayed the names of different companies where our parent company ought to have been. When the laptops returned from the repair center, the new labels had the same discrepancy. For reasons explained in the above section, one of those repair center labels was completely irrelevant. The other label, however, which I had simply dismissed earlier as that's weird, said this. County Regional Community College. Hereafter referred to as CRCC. So, that's why these laptops are such pieces of crap. I exclaimed, jubilantly. It all made perfect sense now. This community college must have made a bulk computer order that was being fulfilled at the same time as ours. Whoever put the shipment together must have just gotten the boxes mixed up. Stuff like that happens. With that, a ray of light appeared before me. Were the community college's laptops swapped with mine? If they should happen to have gotten my missing laptops, that'd mean I wouldn't have to get any sales reps or purchasing departments involved whatsoever, potentially saving me several days of back and forth emailing with corporate. I searched around and found that CRCC was in a different state, but relatively close to mine, which seems to make sense. I found their IT department's website easily enough, but I wasn't able to track down any kind of direct contact information. The only email address I turned up was for the CRCC IT help desk. I then turned to my immediate colleagues and asked if anyone wanted to place bets on whether CRCC's help desk would be slower to respond than our own corporate IT help desk. Unsurprisingly, I didn't have any takers. I sent the CRCC help desk a message to this effect. Greetings and be prepared for one of the weirdest emails you'll see today. I am the local IT person at business in city state. I believe I have two laptops in my possession which actually belong to CRCC. figured I would need to instantly hook whatever college student happened to be manning the help desk that day, and that such an opener would do the trick. I then proceeded to explain my theory of what had happened. I included the serial numbers in question, as well as a picture of the shipping label showing the name of the college. I then described the laptops they would have received if there had been a true switcheroo, and ended with an impassioned plea to help rectify the situation, just between us lowly IT people. I'm hoping against hope that your laptops somehow got swapped with mine, that you'll be able to track them down, and that we can just correct the problem ourselves. Basically, I'm asking you a favor. This is going to be a giant headache between me, manufacturer, and our corporate purchasing department. I'm hoping that you'll be able to save me a few weeks of bureaucratic nonsense. I am genuinely looking forward to hearing from you. If nothing else, this will be an amusing story. It was well over 6 months past the ship date, so even if CRCC did have my laptops, I was doubtful they'd be able to retrieve them if they were already deployed. But I figured it was worth a shot. I was also a little concerned that the proposal to swap my laptops for theirs would read a little scammy, but I trusted that this message would be so unusual that it would get passed along to someone who would know what I was talking about. I fired that off at about 4 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon. Just after 9 o'clock the following morning, I began my day by having a wonderful conversation with the CRCC helpdesk manager. As expected, I made an immediate impression on the frontline tech. It had triggered their scam instincts, understandably so, but they were thrown off by the strangeness of it and passed it along. When it got to the person to whom I was speaking, they saw right away it was probably legit. They recounted paying a visit to the college's head of purchasing and asking if my story rang any bells. To their amazement, the answer they got was an instantaneous yes. That didn't surprise me one bit. Accounting and finance people tend to have savant-like memories, in my experience. The story I was told is that CRCC had indeed made a large computer purchase around the same time as us. When their shipment arrived, however, it was 2 laptops short. Under normal circumstances they would have rejected the delivery, but they couldn't afford any more delays due to the pressing need for laptops in the middle of the pandemic. I imagine a college, even a regional community one, were probably a lot busier than I was in this regard. They had little choice but to accept the delivery, which precipitated a pitched, 3-month-long battle with the manufacturer to get the remaining laptops they were owed, with the manufacturer insisting all had been delivered, because the system said so. To my slight disappointment then, CRCC did not have my missing laptops. Still, we had a very enjoyable chat. I got the impression that the college's purchasing person was genuinely grateful for the closure I provided, and for the fact that their harrowing fight with the manufacturer was now completely vindicated. In return, they dug up the original invoices. They sent screenshots later that day which definitively proved that these 2 laptops were originally supposed to have been theirs. Those invoices were all the evidence I would need. The end of the story is rather boring, so I'll wrap it up quick. I had a choice of how to proceed next. I could either A. Contact the guy at corporate in charge of computer purchasing, with whom I've dealt multiple times in the past, or B. Try my luck with our parent company's sales rep with the manufacturer. After a surprisingly prolonged period of deliberation, maybe 30 seconds, I emailed the entire tale to the sales rep, including photos of the serial numbers and the invoices from CRCC. The sales rep agreed to send replacements without question. At long last, on this very day, the final 2 of my new laptops have arrived. They even have the right specs this time. Leonard and Heinrich were shipped back to the manufacturer last week, and they lived happily ever after. Or not. I couldn't care less.